A question that I get asked a lot is how to properly clean a cup gun. A lot of people seem to dislike the process. It's really quick and easy. Let me show you how I do it. If you're like me, you love spraying finishes, right? So these are two of the main guns that I use. I also use an HVLP with a turbine system, but I use these more. Anyway, this is probably my most used gun. It's an inexpensive Finex by Graco. Super quick and easy to get into small places and shoots pretty decent. This one, if I'm doing a larger project or I really need to lay down a high quality finish, this is my FLG4. It's a DeVilbiss. This thing is fantastic. All right, a few things you're gonna need. Maybe some safety glasses, gloves. Get those guys on. All right, maybe not so necessary to disassemble it, but cleaning it, you'll need gloves. You'll also need some pipe cleaners. These are fantastic, sometimes called fuzzy sticks, right? Your wife's toothbrush, a couple of rags, and some sort of a tub full of solvent. I'm using lacquer thinner, and so we're just gonna start. Pulling the lid off. This has this little vent, so you might want to separate that as well. And most guns are going to be very similar to this. They may not be exact, but they're very similar. Sometimes you might need a wrench here to get the cup loose. And I take it apart in this order so that I can put the small parts in here and they don't fall through. Of course, you could use a basket if you have one of those. Drop that guy in. Remove this, right? This particular gun has a rubber seal in here, so I don't leave any of my parts in the lacquer thinner very long. But 30 minutes is not gonna hurt anything. Let's see, then we need a wrench. This actually has a wrench, but I think it's in the other room. This particular one is a 3/4 or a 19 millimeter. Take the nozzle out. We can loosen this volume knob spring. That's really not dirty, but I'll drop that in there anyway. The needle will come out just by depressing the trigger. It brings it out, and then you can pull it straight out. Be very careful with this. You don't want to bend that. Don't use that to pry anything. There's a little, on this particular model, there's a little gasket here. This never really gets very dirty. I don't soak this in the thinner, so I just set this aside. And that is about it. You could break this down further, but typically that's all I'll do. There's a retainer here to hold the trigger on. Sometimes you can pull that loose and get some of the overspray that accumulates back in here. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and do that. Little clip, save that. I like using magnets. That's really not dirty. I don't want to drop it in there. I'll just set that aside. That comes off, boom. And then we can submerge this entire gun. And I have this coffee tub. I can put a lid on that. I'll just let that set for about half an hour. So this has been soaking for a couple hours probably. And incidentally, I have left this soaking overnight many times. In the manual on this one, it says not to immerse this into solvent, which I don't know how else you're supposed to clean it. It should be able to handle a little bit of solvent. I get that plastic and rubber can be affected by solvent, which is why I leave this one out. But just so you know, I have left this in longer than just 30 minutes, like I was saying earlier, that I was gonna leave this in here for. But anyway, so a lot of this on the outside. And it's going to come off pretty easy. This gun was used earlier, so it's not going to be adhered real well. A lot's going to depend on the finish you're using. If you're using a conversion varnish and you let that sit for 3 days, you're going to have a hard time getting it off. So make sure you pay attention to those time frames. I'm going to have a little bit of residual in here. Of course, the threads, but overall, this is actually pretty clean right out of the tub. Okay, and I seldom take this apart. I have before, if it's not controlling the pattern correctly. Of course, when you open this up, it makes that pattern wider. Conversely, when you close it, it narrows the pattern. If it's not working right, sometimes I'll take that apart. There's a spring in there and a little seat. You just have to make sure it's clean, but in general, this doesn't get dirty back in here. Okay, you can set that aside and let this drain out. Now, since this tub is not full of lacquer thinner, I'm just going to clean the bottom half of this and then drop it back in upside down. Looks pretty good, actually. Okay, you can see some lacquer here at the top. Just drop that in. Now, it's true, parts of this video are sped up, but overall, this process doesn't take that long. In general, these parts that live on the outside, they might just get a little bit of overspray, and so it's a very light film. In this case, lacquer. I was shooting some lacquer, and it comes right off. This guy here will accumulate some finish right around these orifices, depending on how long you've been spraying. I mean, if you spray for hours, it might build up a little bit, but in general, it might not have any or very little. So that looks pretty good. The idea is to clean this each and every time after you're finished using it. And you're going to see how long this video is. It's not very long, including the breakdown time. This probably shouldn't take 10 to 15 minutes. That's not very much time to ensure that you have a gun that sprays really well. If your gun's not spraying right, it's probably dirty. This firing pin, this needle, it needs to be clean. Just be careful with it. It has to have nice clean surfaces here for that to seat and remain closed. This here is where I use one of these fuzzy sticks, also known as a pipe cleaner. There we go. But that doesn't need much. That looks pretty clean. Sometimes you can use a cotton swab to get inside there. Fight the urge to use that to clean with. And this has a bunch of orifices around the perimeter, but air goes through those, so they're typically not going to get dirty or accumulating any finish of any kind. spring. Not much to it. And that's about it, right? Maybe the back of this guy I kind of missed. I'll let this sit for another 30 minutes and that should all come off. Matter of fact, most of it came off already. And incidentally, if your cup is plastic and the lid is plastic, you may note that they don't quite fit after soaking in solvent. Just let them sit out in open air for, you know, a few hours, a day or whatever, and then attempt to put that on. This is fitting, but sometimes they'll get distorted from soaking in the solvent and the lacquer thinner. They'll go back, they'll retain their shape after you let them sit out for a little bit. Or regain their shape, I should say. Assembly is pretty straightforward. This guy goes in here, but we need this little gasket first. This one has a little pin right there. This doesn't have to be really very tight, but it needs to be snug. Needle goes in. Most of these guns are very similar in how they are constructed, right? Actually, I should have put this on first. There we go. I actually thought that was my keeper. It was actually a bar magnet. Okay, that's the right piece. A little tricky to do with gloves on. Retainer clip. There we go. Now I can put this guy in. This goes on. As easy as that. That dude should spray just like it did when it was brand new. I usually don't use a wrench on that. Hand tight's plenty. Boom. That's how you do it. I am going to let this soak a little bit more on this top side. I've got a little bit of junk around these threads. I need to fish out that little piece. There it is. I should have dropped that inside the cup. Anyway. You definitely want to wear gloves working with lacquer thinner. Look what it does to those nitrile gloves. And this thing, this vent is really important. If your gun can't get air, it won't shoot. So that little orifice plugs actually quite easily. Especially if you have your cup full and you tilt a little bit, you know, where the solvent gets to that vent, it'll plug it. So something to watch when you're spraying. I actually keep on my stand a little device where I can clear that. It's just a little wire. This actually goes here. My wrench should be there. So these stands I make are pretty useful. Just some Baltic birch. Boom, right? And that is it. Literally that simple. That'll be ready to go next time I shoot. Anyway, thanks a ton for watching. Ciao.